Welcome to the June the 21st, 1994 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie. And It Happened in Grand Prairie is the history of our city and some of the people that have been important to it. And we're very excited to bring you history tape number 226 today. And this is an unusual history presentation. We're going to be interviewing a very fine young lady, but we're going to be memorializing her recently deceased husband, Mike Kingston. And we're so pleased to welcome to the set Ann, Mrs. Mike Kingston. Welcome to the set.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're delighted to have you with us, Ann, and I know that it was a surprise when you received our telephone call when we found about the death of a young man that had been very important in our lives here in Grand Prairie and all of Texas, and we didn't know of your long tenure as a citizen of Grand Prairie until you lost Mike.
I know.
And since I have with me something that each and every year I go to the bookstore or order it from the Dallas Morning News, the Texas Almanac. And we're going to talk about Mike, the editor of the Texas Almanac, and we're going to do that through Ann. And Ann, we're just so excited for you to be able to look out into your camera. And let's document the real Ann Kingston. Give us your genealogy. Give us your maiden name of your mother and father's name, and let's talk about it.
All right.
All right.
My father's name was William White. My mother's maiden name was McDowell. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and Little Rock, Arkansas, and I came to Dallas in 1957. Worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I lived in Dallas until 1972, and I moved to Grand Prairie, Texas, where I made my residence there with Mike Kingston, and he worked for the Dallas Morning News, of course, and I'm still working for Blue Cross Blue Shield and probably will be for some number of years to come. And I've loved this area, and Mike loved this area too. He thought it was a great place to live because it was out from the hustle and bustle of town, and it's just a lovely community.
Now, let's get back. We do have your father's first name. We have your mother's maiden name, but we'd like her first name in this genealogy.
Laura. It's a very unusual name. It's spelled L-U-R-A.
Laura. All right. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
No, I'm an only child.
You're an only child and pampered and
Yes.
loved back in Tennessee.
And spoiled.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your life in Tennessee, some of the schools you attended? Also, I'd like you to name drop any mentors that were important in your life when you were a young person growing up. If there was a special first, second, third, or fifth, or ninth grade teacher that really motivated Ann.
Oh, that's too far back to remember.
Yes, it is.
I went to grade school in Memphis in a small school called Miss Lee's School. It was a private school. And then I lived shortly in New Orleans, where I moved around quite a bit because my father owned quite a few farms, and so we were able to move around from city to city. But most of my education was in Little Rock. I went to junior high and high school in Little Rock before I moved to Dallas. So I can't remember any teachers right off the bat. I did have a lot of wonderful teachers, especially in high school. Little Rock Central High School was a wonderful high school to go to. It was a small community, and we had one high school, and of course we knew everyone, and we had some outstanding teachers. I enjoyed drama in high school, and I enjoyed history. I had a history teacher that taught Latin American history, which was an elective subject in high school, and I dearly loved that subject. She put her heart and soul into it and made us feel the same way.
And after high school in Arkansas, Then how did you pursue your educational career further?
I went to Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri, and got my Associate of Arts degree in radio and television,
Yes.
which I never did anything with when I came to Dallas. I decided not to pursue that and went to work for Blue Cross Blue Shield in October of 1957, and I've been there ever since.
And what would one do at Blue Cross Blue Shield that has a background in television and the other medias?
Not anything.
Not anything to do with it.
No,
Okay.
I went into the finance division.
Yes.
And worked in the cashier department for 13 years, and then I've been in the payroll department ever since.
And love it.
Yes, love it. Wonderful group of girls to work with.
And you commute from Grand Prairie, Texas to where at Blue Cross
To
Blue Shield?
Richardson, that's
To
where our
Richardson.
headquarters is, out in Richardson, and I'm in a company van that picks me up in Irving every morning, and
How nice.
and the van goes to Richardson and then brings us back to Irving every afternoon, and we have our car in a church parking lot there. So it's the only way to go in the hustle and bustle of the traffic around Dallas.
That's wonderful carpooling. I'd like to ask you this. During this transition, the time you have lost Mike and being at Blue Cross Blue Shield, are there special people there in your department or some that you'd like to name drop that have just been more than dear to you?
Oh, well, all of the people that I know at Blue Cross have been wonderful, and especially all of the girls. I work with 9 other girls in the payroll office,
Yes.
and every one of them have just been a blessing to help me get through this bad time. And my boss, Jean Nelson, has just been especially wonderful to me, and I just couldn't have made it without all the help that I had from my friends at Blue Cross.
All right. Now let's get down to Mike. I'd like for you to give his genealogy, tell a little bit about his early childhood, if you can
All
bring
right.
that to bear.
Sure.
Good.
Mike was born in Breckenridge, Texas, and he went through grade school, junior high, and high school there. He attended TCU, and he didn't graduate. He went around 2 years or a little bit more than that. He was studying to be an engineer, and he really didn't care for that. He'd always loved writing, and so he dropped out of school and decided to go to work for the Breckenridge American, and he went to work for them in 1961 and became editor of the paper there. And of course he loved writing. He just had a God-given talent for it because he had never taken any journalism classes, and he of course became editor there and stayed for quite some number of years. In 1968 he went to work for the Irving News and became editor of the paper while he was there. And let's see, he stayed there for a couple of years and then accepted a position as editorial writer for the Dallas Morning News. And then in 1981, he accepted a position as editor of the Texas Almanac. And at that time, he had an assistant, a lady that had been with the Texas Almanac for a number of years, and she was very good in helping him learn a lot about the Almanac. She retired shortly after he took over office. Her name was Ruth Harris, and she had been with the news for 45 years and, of course, worked for quite a few Almanac editors. And then when she retired, Mike had Mary Crawford that was, she worked with the Texas Historical Commission.
Yes.
And she's just a wonderful woman, and she has been such a wonderful help to Mike during all his years with Almanac. She has now taken over the editor of the Texas Almanac, which I can't think of anyone that would have been, more helpful in taking over the Almanac. She's just a wonderful, smart person, and I'm real happy for her.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about Mike's parents, if you would
Sure.
name drop them, and if he had any brothers or sisters.
Yes, no, he was an only child. His father's name was Benson, and his mother's name was Maxine.
Okay.
And his mother came from Tennessee and his father was from Texas. And of course, they lived in Breckenridge for many, many years. They passed away when Mike was around 21 years old. Unfortunately, I never got to meet them, but I knew a lot of people that told me so many wonderful things about him. Mike had a great aunt that he lived with after his mother and father died. Her name was Tempest Pennington, and she lived in Breckenridge during the oil boom days, and she was such a delight to be around. She had so many wonderful stories to tell us about the oil boom days in Breckenridge. So, and I learned a lot about Mike's parents through his great aunt.
Like to know about how you met Mike and about your courtship.
Oh, all right. Well, I met Mike through a friend that had told me that Mike worked for the Dallas Morning News, and at that time he was an editorial writer, and he had his picture in the paper quite often. So they showed me a picture of him in the paper and said, "This is Mike, and we sure would like for you to meet him, that he's a real nice person." And so I said, well, I guess so. I wasn't much on blind dates, but I thought, well, it isn't exactly that way. I've seen his picture in the paper, and
yes.
I know a little bit about him. So we went out, and it was just, we got along just fine to start out with, and I guess it was almost love at first sight.
That is wonderful.
We went together for almost 2 years, and we married in 1970.
Yes.
And we lived in Dallas for 2 years before we moved out here to Grand Prairie in March of 1972. So, we had really a wonderful life out here. It's been a nice community to live in. Mike liked it so much out here. This was his first choice, and I liked the community too. I went along with him as being a good place to have your permanent residence.
We need to talk about Mike as a writer, and
All
if
right.
you would start in chronological order,
Yes,
show and tell some of the
Sure.
wonderful things that he has written. Would
I'll
you
be
do
glad
that?
to. This is Almanac 1984 to 1985, and it was one of the first almanacs that Mike put out as an editorial writer. And it has everything that you could want to know about Texas in this book. Has all the counties and anything, any type of information that you want to find about Texas is in the Texas Almanac. If you have enough time to look at all of it, it's got pictures, maps. Mike, from his engineering, geology engineering background, he designed a lot of the maps in the book, and of course he wrote the almanac has been around since before the turn of the century, and as the new editor, he came in and added more subjects in here, and improved on some of the other things, updated some of the articles and all in here.
It is just wonderful.
It is a good reference.
How much of a staff did he have? Because when he began this, computers were not
I know it.
in vogue, and all
That's
of this
true.
had to be records and files
That's
and
right.
files.
There was only 2 people. There's never been but 2 people working on it. So they did have some other departments that helped them, and as time went on, by 1983, they were doing almost all of the computer work.
Yes.
And by the time you were putting out one, the latest almanac, it was almost all on computer by then.
And you were working on the next year by the time this one hit the street, right?
It comes out every 2 years.
Yes.
So they just as soon as they finish one, they put another one out. They're just right back to back.
That was his main claim to fame as far
That's
as
true.
many of us are concerned. But he has another claim to fame from Breckenridge, Texas. Do you want to talk about his
Yes,
wonderful
certainly
book
do.
about Breckenridge?
That's true. This is a book that Mike was most proud of, and he wrote this book and had it published on his own, and he had always been interested in Walter Prescott Webb, and he had a historical marker given to the town, and they had a big memorial and all for the historical marker for Walter Prescott Webb. The book is about Walter Prescott Webb when he lived in Stevens County during his period of life, which would have been his early life in Stevens County. But Mike had always been interested in him as a wonderful historian, and when he found out that he had lived in Stevens County right outside of Breckenridge, he just knew that if he never wrote any book other than this, he would be happy. Yes. And when this was published, he was so proud of it, and to have a historical marker there at the courthouse in Breckenridge was just the most wonderful thing.
That's the ultimate,
It's the ultimate for sure.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Also, during his time as the almanac editor, he wrote quite a few excerpts. These are excerpts from the almanac. He did a concise history of Texas, which is an excerpt from the almanac. He also did a political history, which is an excerpt from the book, and also a little pamphlet on the governors of Texas. And all of these books just pull out certain parts of the almanac, and they're just good reference. They're good for the school children that won't just certain parts of the almanac that I think are interesting. And it's just these books are good if you want just a particular part of the almanac that you're interested in.
Did Mike bring his almanac work home in his mind, or did he have a special place there?
Yes, he was always working. He had computers at home, and he was always working on the almanac. If he wasn't at work working on it, he was at home. As soon as I'd come home from work, Mike was always on the computer thinking of something new to put into the almanac, yes, or working on an excerpt maybe for a new book or something out of the almanac.
Did he have any other hobbies other than the almanac and his writing?
He loved genealogy, and he did quite a bit of work on his background, and worked on that as he could. But since he was working, it was real hard to spend that much time on it. But he would write to people all over Texas. If he found a Kingston name, well, he would call them and ask them, "Are we related?" He found an awfully not a lot of nice people that would talk to him about whether they were related. One year we drove out to Balmorhea, Texas, at the foothills of the Davis Mountains, and there was some Kingstons that lived out there, and we went out to visit them. They had a beautiful farm and country home out there, and we went to visit them, and they were some relation to Mike. I'm not sure what it was, but we had a wonderful visit with them. So, anybody that's working on genealogy, if they just get into it and call people, you'd be surprised how nice people are and how helpful they are in helping you trace your heritage.
Wonderful. Do you have hobbies or anything that's helped you bridge the gap now?
Oh, well, of course, Mike has gotten me so interested in history and historical things that I hope that I can get into the Dallas Historical Society, the Grand Prairie Historical Society. We belong to the East Texas, West Texas, and the Dallas Historical Society. We went to all the conventions and everything, and it just got into my blood. I love it. And I hope to pursue it when I have a little more time, when I retire. Right now working, it's so hard to have the time to do that. Mike was a political writer when he was on the editorial page, and he got me awfully interested in politics.
Yes.
And I'd like to work with the Democratic Party if I can.
Yes.
And I just love all these two different kind of things. Mike really loved them so much, and he projected the love of that into me, and I certainly enjoy it a lot, and plan to keep up as much of his work as I can.
Since you have no children, how would you like for you and Mike to be remembered?
Oh, is contributing as much as we can to Texas. Mike loved Texas so much, and even though I'm not a native, I've learned to love Texas, and I want to live here in Texas the rest of my life. And he's just made you love this state so much and want to be a part of it and do things that are connected with it.
Did you take him back to Stevens County?
No, he's buried here in Grand Prairie.
I was hoping you would tell us that.
Yes, I deliberated about that quite a bit on what to do, because his family's all buried in Breckenridge.
Yes.
But I especially wanted him here because this is my home, and I can visit his graveside as often as I want to.
Yes.
And that's the main reason why I decided to have him buried here.
All right, I'd like for you to look out into your camera now, and I'd like for you to talk to the young folks and let them know how important you feel that history is, and leaving your mark, and encourage them in any way you can. We have about 3 minutes left on our tape.
All right. If you love Texas and you love writing, that's one of the most rewarding things that you can get into. Mike enjoyed both so much, and it was so rewarding to him and meant so much to him that if you care about either one of these, do pursue that, because it's a wonderful and fulfilling career, I think.
Would you, by any chance, since you have a background in the media, ever take up professional writing, do you think, in your own right?
Oh, I don't really think I have a talent for writing. I enjoy meeting with people and enjoy history and all, but I don't think I could ever write. I don't think I have a natural aptitude for it. I've never tried it before, and I'm not sure that I would be good at it at all.
I'd like to ask this about your career. Did take a great change.
Certainly did.
From what you had really started out as a television media person.
That's true.
And you ended up in finance.
I know.
Tell me about a transition like that, because I need for the young people that watch our show to know that when they go to college, if they start out in the first 2 years, they feel like they bombed out if they change their major 2 or 3 times. But here you have graduated from college and you take a complete turn. I'd like you to let them know how exciting that's been and how rewarding it could be.
Well, it is. I work for a big company, and I think that whatever you pursue is up to you. But if you want to change, don't be afraid to change, because there's so many opportunities out there, and just try to make the best of what you're doing. And I love working for Blue Cross. It's a wonderful company, and I have a lot of wonderful benefits, and I've met a lot of wonderful people, so I don't have any regrets about the change I made.
Did Mike leave any unfinished manuscripts that he had started a little bit here and a little bit there that needs to be finished that you might want to pursue?
Well, he did leave some things, but I would have to have some help with it, because I'm not a professional writer. And when I do start going through all of his things, I may try to get some help and get someone to help me pursue some of the different things that he was trying to finish up.
What were some of the honors that Mike received? Now, I know that he received all sorts, and we have a little time to talk about this, so let's document Mike.
Well, he's past president of the Dallas Press Club. He has a fellowship with the East Texas Historical Association. He's been president of the Professional Journalism Association. Golly, there's just been so many honors. He's gotten just so many honors from different clubs. He's spoken at so many different clubs around town, and been honored with all types of awards for his writing, especially since he's been with Almanac. He's really received so many awards from different organizations. But I think, the East Texas Fellowship that he received was one of the most rewarding things for him. He worked very hard to help the East Texas Historical Association, and they've been just wonderful to him. Archie McDonald, who's was with the East Texas Association, was just wonderful to Mike and did so many things to help him, and was so instrumental in getting this fellowship for him to the East Texas Historical Association.
Did he have any plans to do a Kingston book or history of the Kingstons?
Oh, I think he did, since he was so very involved in genealogy. I think eventually he probably would have done that. Maybe in his later years after he retired, he would love to have done something on the Kingston background, because genealogy was one of his very favorite subjects outside of work.
Mm-hmm. Was he very much into politics at all?
Yes, he was, especially when he was an editorial writer and writing with the political part of the editorial page. And he got me interested in it too, but he was always interested in local and state politics, and it was always interested in we used to go down to the Baker Hotel when they had the Texas returns down there, and we'd get all caught up in all the enjoyment of the returns coming in and all the winners, and I guess that's how I got kind of caught up in politics, because it was such a exciting being down there among all the winners, and he always enjoyed that so much.
He did have editorships of at least 2 papers, or maybe more?
Yeah, the Breckenridge, the Irving paper. He was editors of both of those papers.
And in being the editor, you always have to editorialize. He was super at that, I'm sure.
That was one of the best.
Well, there's not much I can say that I would have just loved to have done an interview with that young man, but I feel almost akin to him through you.
Well,
and I want to thank you for taking time out of your life. I'd like to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield for letting you out of the cage this afternoon.
Yes, I appreciate that too.
And all of the girls and boys that are covering for you over there for your job this afternoon, and being able to bring us this interview of a young man that was a Grand Prairiean. And he is still with us here in Grand Prairie, Texas.
That's true.
And we're going to have some of the books so that we can start a little shelf in the library in his memory. I think that would be most appropriate.
I know Mike would certainly appreciate
And we've already adopted Stevens County in his honor on our 254 counties in Turner Park.
Wonderful.
So he's memorialized that way. I want to thank you, Ann.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.